100 feet beneath the Egyptian desert, a team of archaeologists is carefully dismantling an ancient stone wall.
We are expecting the unexpected.
They're searching for evidence of a burial chamber, hidden for the past 2,500 years. The work is risky.
Is it safe to remove the wall or not safe?
But the potential reward is a discovery that could help unlock the secrets of life and death in ancient Egypt.
Oh, there's stuff in there. Ramadan, there's stuff in there.
Let me see. No way. We thought it's going to be big, but this is huge. I think I am a very lucky Egyptologist.
Saqqara, Egypt. In the shadow of the world's oldest pyramid, renowned Egyptologist Dr. Ramadan Hussein and his team of archaeologists are investigating a groundbreaking new site.
This is one of the most beautiful mummies I have ever seen in my life.
A 2,500-year-old funeral home where ancient Egyptians, rich and poor, were mummified and buried deep underground. What makes the site so special is that nothing remotely like it has ever been found before.
Personally, I never thought I would be making discoveries like this. We were always collecting information about ancient Egyptians, but a discovery of this magnitude is absolutely unprecedented in Egyptian archaeology.
The first clue that this is no ordinary site is a deep pit carved from solid limestone.
We made a big discovery in the form of an intact shaft. It's about 13 meters deep. At this point, I've realized this shaft is an embalmer's cachette, a hiding place that the ancient Egyptian embalmers used to collect all the tools and the vessels they used during mummification.
The team has also found other deep shafts. Now it's using the latest laser scanning technology to take its investigations to the next level.
We use a laser scanner to get the big picture of the whole site.
We're doing the two scans, put them over there.
To reconstruct the whole site with all context, with all objects in high resolution.
By stitching dozens of scans together, the team is mapping the complex both above ground and below. The scans reveal a network of shafts and passageways stretching nearly 100 feet down and leading to a set of burial chambers untouched for thousands of years. From the style of pottery found in the shaft, the chambers have all been dated to around 600 BC, when the practice of mummification was at its peak. It's Ramadan's mission to decode this sprawling site and rewrite the book on mummification and burial in ancient Egypt. To reach the burial chambers, the team has had to clear over 450 tons of sand from a vertical shaft known as K24.
This is a fabulous shaft. This one's been cut through limestone of varying qualities. You can see that the ancient Egyptians have shored it up a bit to make sure that things don't come collapsing down. And it's extraordinarily deep. It's 30 meters.
At the bottom of K24, 100 feet down, is a hallway with 5 adjoining chambers. 2 to the west, 2 to the north, and 1 to the east. Inside these rooms, Ramadan and his team are uncovering an incredible range of treasures, including the first silver mummy mask found in Egypt for nearly a century.
It's very rare. You don't find it every day.
Grave goods to provide the dead with everything they needed in the afterlife, plus dozens of embalming cups containing traces of the actual oils used during mummification. And Ramadan suspects that the complex has even more secrets to share.
Today, we're very interested to explore this area right here, where we're standing on the first hallway. We have one burial chamber on the west, but on the east, we have this wall. Egyptians were always consistent. I think there might be another burial chamber behind this wall. We're removing one stone so we can get a better look at what's behind.
Oh, there's stuff in there. Ramadan, there's stuff in there.
What's in there?
There's this dark stuff that looks as if it's mummy residue, resinous substance of some sort.
It's an encouraging start, but not everyone is happy.
Yes, I'm concerned because some of these rocks are cracked. So cracking means that it is overloaded. Now we were discussing, is it safe to remove the wall or not safe?
After weighing up the risk, Ayman gives the okay to continue.
Get up.
No way.
It does seem to be an opening of some sort that keeps on going.
This is the surprise we're looking for. Oh my God. This is the hole that keeps giving. Oh my, this is unbelievable. This looks bigger than everything we've seen here. This is unreal. We're just happy because we thought it's going to be big, but this is huge.
Discovering the tomb is just the start. Now Ramadan must investigate the new chamber to see if it can shed any new light on the ancient practice of mummification.
A 9-year-old me came from a really humble background, with a lot of work. Everything you went through is worth it. I came into this field with a lot of passion and love, but I don't think a lot of people have my luck. And this is what's so emotional about it.
100 feet beneath the desert, Egyptologist Dr. Ramadan Hussein and his team are opening the newly discovered burial chamber. For Ramadan, its contents are a golden opportunity to learn more about the mysterious practice of mummification.
We can just have a peek at a really big room with a number of wooden coffins. So we have multiple burials in there. And I could see already a wooden box with a calcite canopic jar that I'm seeing right there.
Canopic jars like this were used to store the organs of the dead as a way of guaranteeing eternal life. And on one of them, Ramadan, an expert in hieroglyphics, spots a name.
Now we had a photograph of the canopic jars, and I could see the name we have here is Didi Bastet. So it's good to find a mummy, it's good to find a coffin, it's good to find a canopic jar. But it's much better to be able to put a name on this.
The name Didi Bastet is also significant for another reason. Across the hallway, on the sarcophagus of a priest called Chanimit, is a painted inscription. It describes not only his titles, but also the name of his mother, one Didi Bastet.
It makes you happy as a family reunion here. You get the son and the mother in the same place. And you don't find this very often in archaeology.
Armed with this crucial new information, the team gets ready to enter Didi Bastet's chamber for the first time.
We're setting up some light in here because the room is quite dark. عمار ما تخليهاش مايلة، خليها مستقيمة. لا مستقيمة في الكورنر.
2,500 years of heat and humidity have taken their toll, and the room's contents are extremely fragile. So the first job is to create a carbon copy.
You have seen all the wood inside the chamber. As soon as someone touches it, it will just fall apart and it will fall into dust. So the only possibility to preserve it is to have a digital 3D model.
The team is using a digital imaging technique called photogrammetry. It involves stitching together hundreds of overlapping photographs to create a 3D model.
It's always exciting. It's always exciting to get inside a burial chamber and be the first to explore it.
The project is using technology like this to document every inch of the site, and the scans are revealing that it was much more than just a handful of tombs. In their quest for eternal life, customers like Didi Bastet weren't only buried here, they were also mummified.
One of the key parts of having a good afterlife is to preserve your body, because the Egyptians believed that if your body is preserved and recognizable, your spirit essence can go into it and reanimate it. And mummification was key to that because that made your body well preserved.
From written records, we know that Egyptian embalmers could take as long as 70 days to produce a finished mummy. Much less, though, is known about where mummification took place. Just to the north of K24 is another shaft, leading to an empty chamber. In it, Ramadan has found intriguing evidence that it was used for mummification.
Hey.
Hi, great to meet you. And you.
To test his findings, Ramadan has invited along mummification expert Dr. Stephen Buckley.
We're going to put a climbing harness on for you. Okay. So it's just like putting on a pair of pants, really. 1 foot in each leg loop. There we go.
Until now, the only archaeological evidence for mummification has been above ground.
The reality of mummifying a body is quite a challenging one. You need not only the right materials, but the right environment to achieve that.
If Ramadan is right about the chamber, then it would be the first proof that mummification was also performed underground.
Don't worry, we're here. Almost there. Good.
Yes, good.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Compared to the glaring heat above, the atmosphere in the chamber couldn't be more different.
That's what you notice straight away, that it's a lot cooler, and that airflow as well. Very different to up there.
This corridor, this is what brings fresh air and keeps the air moving all the time inside this place.
That's exactly what you need for successful mummification. Bodies can start to decompose relatively quickly. So in a special space with airflow would have been the perfect place for mummification.
And there's another clue that this air-conditioned chamber might have been used for mummification.
The interesting thing that I've noticed here is that large vessel. First, it's in the corner. Second, there is a wall that's built around it. Third is traces of charcoal burning on the side right here.
I can see that, yeah.
So I'm thinking this is a large incense burner.
I agree with you completely. You need a cool, ventilated space for mummification. That's vital. But you've still then got the biggest killer for mummification, which are insects. So the way to actually deal with them is to burn incense. So the coolness, the ventilation, combined with this as an incense burner, would mean that it would be the perfect environment.
I have one last thing to show you, that this lid cut in the bedrock, it's occupying the entire space of the eastern wall, but the back of it, there's a small channel that runs on the side right here, and then runs on the floor, and you could see it all around.
From studying the contents of canopic jars like Didi Bastet's, we know that one of the key stages of mummification was the removal of major organs, like the intestines, liver, and lungs. This ensured that the body didn't rot from within.
Yeah, what's interesting about the evisceration, the removal of the internal organs, is if it's done by someone who's very skillful, then they can put their hand in, perhaps even a large hand, into a relatively small incision and pull out one by one all the internal organs, and they all come out as one.
Could these channels on the floor be the final proof that this is where that grisly procedure was performed?
It makes perfect sense to me that this was used to eviscerate the bodies, where you could take the internal organs out and any blood would go down the channels. This, because the space for mummification, evisceration, is absolutely perfect.
It's so amazing to hear that. It's fantastic.
This remarkable chamber is the first evidence of underground mummification ever found in Egypt. It suggests that this was no ordinary funeral home, but a place where the art of mummification was being reinvented. To learn more, though, Ramadan must inspect Didi Bastet's hidden chamber for the first time.
Archaeology is a field of being a detective on the site. You're collecting information, you're asking questions until you reach a conclusion. And this is what we do.
Beneath the pyramids of Saqqara, Dr. Ramadan Hussein and his team are carefully excavating Didi Bastet's hidden burial chamber.
They might look to somebody like old dusty bones, but for us, they're not. They're humans.
To document the chamber, the team has been creating a digital copy in 3D. And Ramadan is anxious to see the results.
This is the perspective we had from the, let's call it the entrance. But to get like a better idea of what's really going on, we can zoom out and have like the overview of it.
The first thing he notices is Didi Bastet's position.
It's separated from the rest of the burials.
Yeah, and the ledge.
By this wall.
That small ledge.
Looked at from above, the model shows that separating Didi Bastet from the other burials is a low stone wall.
And the other thing is the elevation of it. It's higher than everything in the burial chamber.
Is this careful positioning significant?
If this is correct, it would speak about the status of this person and the specialness of this burial again.
And there's an even bigger surprise. The model reveals something very odd about Didi Bastet's grave goods.
This one right here. This is something unique.
Specifically, the canopic jars containing her internal organs. While it was the ancient Egyptian custom to be buried with 4 canopic jars, the model appears to show 2 extra jars placed either side of Didi Bastet's mummy.
To my knowledge, unprecedented. I haven't seen something like that. I haven't heard something like that. I've been in contact with colleagues to ask them, have they seen a set of 6 canopic jars? So far, the answer I'm getting, this is unheard of. This is something new.
If Ramadan's interpretation of the model is correct, then it's a potentially groundbreaking discovery.
Is it okay?
The only way for him to be sure is to inspect the jars for himself.
Happy to see a burial that have not been touched for 2,600 years.
The first thing to catch his eye is a set of Shabti figurines.
Oh, blue as it could be, and the Shabtis.
One of the most popular objects to put into your tomb were called Shabtis. And these Shabtis are there to work for you. So it meant the more Shabtis you had, the more you could have a really relaxing afterlife.
And lying beside the Shabtis, Didi Bastet's canopic jars.
What is so strange is to have 2 sets of these canopic jars. Normally, it's just 1 set of 4, but we have those 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And all of a sudden, I have 1 here on the western side of this coffin, and on the eastern side, there's another one. That's a verse for me. That's something new. That is something new. This complex is unlike any other burial chambers that we have seen.
While there are still questions to answer, such as why Didi Bastet has 6 jars, it would appear that the embalmers from the site were breaking with thousands of years of tradition. What's more, Ramadan thinks that he may have uncovered yet another first.
This rectangular structure right here, I think it has to be connected with the process of mummification.
Just a few feet from the burial shaft K24, workers are carefully excavating a new discovery. A 2,500-year-old mud brick structure whose unusual layout Ramadan has seen once before. Some 10 miles to the north of Saqqara, beneath the pyramids of Giza, is a beautifully decorated tomb belonging to a high-ranking official called Ka.
I haven't been here for almost 10 years. But the scenes and the decoration of these tombs are all in my mind all these years, especially that scene here.
In the middle of a depiction of Ka's funeral procession is what's brought Ramadan here. One of the few surviving illustrations of an ibu, or embalming tent.
An ibu is a temporary tent made for the deceased for the purpose of purification during the mummification process. And we know that this structure is an ibu because Egyptians like to label everything. And here's what we have is the word for ibu. The reed leaf with the for E, and then the leg is for the B sound, and then the quail chick is for the U. So what you read here is ibu.
What's so striking about the ibu, though, is its shape.
So this rectangular structure right here is what makes an ibu. But the main thing in it is that ramp in the middle and the two equal rooms on the sides. And what I have here is a 3D scan of our new structure with a ramp in the middle and two equal rooms or spaces on the sides. So I am 100% sure that what we have in Saqqara is an ibu.
If Ramadan is right, and the structure at Saqqara is an ibu, where the bodies of customers like Didi Bastet were purified and preserved, then the site should hold more clues. Back at Saqqara, Ramadan and mummification expert Stephen Buckley are investigating.
I mean, what interests me is both the layout and what you found.
They're looking for evidence of a crucial process that it's thought took place inside the ibu.
Having removed the internal organs and used the resins and the incense, now it's the key aspect of the mummification, which is the use of the natron, this special, magical, if you like, salt that was so crucial to the preservation of the body.
Natron salt was used by Egyptian embalmers to stop the body from decomposing, and one theory is that it was applied using some form of bath.
I think it's interesting. I mean, what intrigues me is that depression there. From my point of view, this would be the place where they were treating the body with natron. And I think if this had been waterproofed at some point, then a body would fit in this space very nicely, and that would work perfectly with the natron bath to produce a very well mummified individual.
Music to my ears.
This is fantastic because a question is often asked of me. I've done the experiments, I've shown how it was done, but where was it done?
Yeah.
That's always been asked, yeah. And I haven't had an answer until now.
Fantastic. Wonderful to hear that.
This combination of an underground workshop for the removal of internal organs and an ibu, a tent in which the body was preserved and embalmed, is a groundbreaking discovery, as it's evidence of a hugely sophisticated approach to mummification.
We always know about the procedures of mummification from texts and also scenes, but this is the first time we have different structures where mummification and the preparation of the mummies took place. This is very rare.
In fact, it's totally unique, which is why it will allow scholars like Ramadan to build the most accurate picture yet of how ancient Egyptians buried their dead. But for now, Ramadan has a more pressing mystery to solve. Why Didi Bastet was buried with so many canopic jars.
The ancient Egyptians wanted to tell us a story. They wanted to leave everything they believed in a burial chamber like this, on the floor, around the coffin. It is our job now to decode this particular context and explain it to everybody.
Far beneath the desert, Ramadan and his team are preparing to take away Didi Bastet's canopic jars for analysis.
When Didi Bastet passed away 2,600 years ago, her body would have been brought and lowered into this shaft 30 meters deep, then put inside a coffin along with 6 canopic jars. This is definitely unusual. We haven't seen something like that.
But as they're about to enter Didi Bastet's tomb, they notice a problem. The high humidity has caused a mold to appear on some of the mummies.
Being down here in the tomb now, you can feel the moisture, the water in the air, and that matters because that water can reinitiate the bacteria that would cause decay. So that was the real enemy of the mummies.
If left untreated, the spores could be harmful to both the mummies and the team. So work is put on hold while the chambers are sprayed with a special mixture of natural oils similar to those used by ancient embalmers. For centuries, our knowledge of these oils has come mainly from written text. But thanks to some remarkable discoveries, that is beginning to change.
In the mummification complex, one of the most amazing discoveries for me is that we found mounds of pottery pieces, broken pottery vessels, all these cups and sherds inscribed with labels.
Many of these cups still contain rare traces of the actual oils used during mummification.
One of the cups, like this one, this is my little treasure here, because it has residue of the oil trapped inside the walls. We don't know what this oil is. We don't know the plant base of it. But now we have our golden opportunity to know exactly what kind of oil was once inside this cup.
So a team of specialists is analyzing this residue. And the first set of results is now in. From a piece of pot labeled Entiu, thought to be the ancient Egyptian word for myrrh.
So we studied the first organic residue in the pots.
And what did you find?
We find some marker of conifer. And this small marker among the conifer family is cedar. It should be cedar.
So you're telling me that you have found residue of cedar byproduct trapped in the walls of this potsherd?
Exactly.
This is interesting because you normally just translate Entiu as myrrh, but now you're giving me a completely different idea about Entiu. You know, if you think of cedar wood, it was very important for Egyptians. It's fragrant, it's antibacterial, also insecticides.
all these three properties makes it really perfect substance for embalming.
What these results show is that previous assumptions about the embalming oil, NTU, were inaccurate, and that it was derived not from myrrh, but cedar oil. Just as revealing is where this cedar came from.
Cedar doesn't grow in Egypt, so it has to be imported.
As you see in the map, if you look for the cedar, there is two kinds of origin. One in Morocco, Algeria, and other kind of cedar from Lebanon, Turkey.
Yeah, so we're talking about highly expensive product here, and it's not
Probably.
Egyptian product, it's imported.
All of which suggests that mummification was far more than a religious rite. It was also big business.
It all just puts in this context that I always think about is the economics of embalming. How much do you have to pay in order to get your body mummified in a complex like this, especially if you have to use foreign products?
As you say, it's high-value products.
So could there also be a business reason for Didi Bastet's 6 canopic jars? Now that the chambers have been sprayed, Ramadan can, at last, find out.
It is very exciting. What will be in them? This is a big question. We're waiting for an answer.
Inside the hidden burial chamber, it's now safe for Ramadan and his team to start removing some of Didi Bastet's many grave goods.
I have never seen something like this. This is beautiful.
It's treasures. You have to be careful.
Among the items being packed up and hoisted to the surface are her canopic jars. Since it was the norm to be buried with 4 jars, each containing a different organ, Ramadan is intrigued to know why Didi Bastet was buried with 6.
Everything must be slowly.
So the 2 extra jars are being taken to Cairo's Egyptian Museum under armed escort.
So we are on our way now to the museum. The canopic jars, they're safe in the box. Also with the high security escort that we have right now. Very confident everything will go very well today, and very excited about it.
Using the museum's CT scanner, Ramadan is hoping to reveal the jar's contents.
The real power of this machine is that it gives us an idea about what is actually inside the object. Do we expect to find a mummy organ? Can we see a liver? It's an adventure.
The first jar, depicting the jackal-headed god Duamutef, is placed inside the scanner.
This is very interesting. This is such a unique piece.
It's followed by the falcon-headed jar.
We did the CT scans of the 2 small canopic jars. And the first one is the jackal. What we can see here is the inside it is almost totally filled with this grayish material. Now we are adjusting the view, and here the material is totally occupying the inside of the jar. And this is really a peculiar thing that I would say that this is tissue.
So just to double check with you that I understand you correctly, the gray area, which is pretty much the majority of the content,
is human tissue. Is that true?
It could be like linen wrappings or so, but this doesn't look like a wrapping. I don't find the layers of it. I find a lump of tissue.
And it's the same story with the falcon-headed jar, which also appears to contain human tissue. But what type?
We should be thinking about other organs that we traditionally don't see in burials, in economic jars, something like the brain, something like the kidneys. It's a possibility, why not? But I'm very happy to know that there's soft tissue inside the two economic jars.
The discovery that the two small jars could contain extra organs is a fascinating new piece of information.
We could have all the organs of Didi Busted being taken out, embalmed, and put inside 6 economic jars. There might be the brain of Didi Busted and the kidneys, the 2 organs that would never been embalmed in ancient Egypt. We've never seen this happening for any person, but that could be the situation with Didi Busted.
So why was this done?
We're guessing that Didi Busted would have bought an extra package where her brain and kidney been embalmed and placed in 2 extra economic jars. It says something about this business of mummification, this establishment. We're willing to move away from tradition in order to upsell, perhaps, or cater to the needs of a certain customer.
It's not just the discoveries inside Didi Basted's chamber that are helping to rewrite the book on mummification. Just as revealing are the finds from the rest of the complex.
What's interesting to me is that Egyptologists have long had a reasonable understanding of how mummification took place, but what was far less clear was where these processes of the mummification took place, and this is what this site provides us with.
We can now very safely talk about the archaeology of mummification, about embalming taking place in an actual real-life structures right here.
But most exciting of all is that the decoding of this unique site and all that it contains has only just begun.
Discovering and excavating a site is only the first step in a very long journey. It takes a very long time, sometimes even decades, to truly understand what one site has to tell us.
I consider myself lucky because of what we're learning from here. It's the big discovery and also what we're learning from it. But also we're developing this personal attachment to this site. That is what keeps us really want to come back every season, every year to work in this place. This site will live for another 30, 40, 50, 60 years.
A 100 feet beneath the Egyptian desert, archaeologists are working in a newly discovered tomb complex.
We're about to open a 2,600-year-old sarcophagus.
The sealed stone casket could contain a mummified body.
You're always thinking about the person who's buried in this sarcophagus. Who are you?
The task requires extreme care.
This is so much stress. Very dangerous.
The lid is about 5 tons. The tiniest mistake in this moment could be a grave mistake.
What lies inside the sarcophagus could help unlock the secrets of life and death in ancient Egypt.
I have to go in right now. I have to look. I need to go. Oh my God, this is fantastic.
Among the ancient pyramids of Saqqara, renowned Egyptologist Dr. Ramadan Hussein and his team of archaeologists are excavating one of the most important sites in Egypt today.
I started thinking about Egyptian history when I was 9 years old, but now I have my chance to lead a multinational team and pretty much enjoy that dream that I had when I was 9 years old. And I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Ramadan's unique discovery is a 2,500-year-old funeral home where dozens of ancient Egyptians, both rich and poor, were mummified and buried deep underground.
We tend to think that only pharaohs, the kings and queens of Egypt, will be the ones who will be mummified. But we're not dealing with kings and queens. What we have here is a segment of ancient Egyptian society that we need to learn about. Not a king or a queen, not a prince, but a normal person like you and me.
Ibrahim, 10. Yes. Yes.
Now the team is using the latest laser scanning technology to record and uncover the site's secrets.
So you are scanning the shaft itself now?
No, now we have the connection scan.
Okay, by connection scan you mean we're connecting features above ground to other ones that is underground?
Yes.
By stitching together dozens of scans, the team is mapping the site both above ground and below, revealing a huge complex of shafts and passageways extending nearly 100 feet down and leading to a set of burial chambers dating back thousands of years.
"30 meters deep, we have this complex of burial chambers."
How cool. Love it.
For project consultant Salime Ikram, the complex is a time capsule of evidence about ancient Egyptian burial practices and beliefs.
The ancient Egyptians were very interested in their afterlives and very invested in it. One of the key parts of having a good afterlife is to preserve your body. If your body is preserved and recognizable, your spirit essence can go into it and reanimate it. So mummification was a crucial component of attaining a happy afterlife.
It's the team's mission to decode this sprawling site and rewrite the book on mummification and burial in ancient Egypt. At the site's core is a vertical shaft known as K24.
So 9 meters down, we found this burial place packed with rows of mummies on top of one another. 17 meters down, we found 10 mummies arranged in 2 rows stacked on top of one another.
Almost every inch of the complex seems to have been used for burials.
20 meters, we found in the south wall this entrance, 2 people buried inside, an uncle and his nephew.
At the bottom of K24 is a set of burial chambers dating back to 600 BC. They contain numerous mummies, stone sarcophagi, and decayed wooden coffins. There are multiple burials in every chamber, apart from one.
What is so mystifying about this burial chamber is that unlike the rest of the burial chambers where we have multiple burials, in this one, we have just one person with a large sarcophagus. It is a mystery.
Solving the mystery of why this person was buried alone will require painstaking work. They'll use ancient techniques and the latest technology to open this lone sarcophagus and investigate its contents.
The opening of sarcophagi is one of the things that goes down in history as pretty much the highlights of every archaeologist's career. I'm absolutely lucky. My team is lucky. This is a career first for me.
Throughout the complex, Ramadan and his team have found an array of treasures, including the first gilded silver mummy mask found in Egypt for nearly a century, and a wealth of grave goods, objects placed with the dead to help secure the best possible afterlife. Early scans of the lone sarcophagus reveal that it too was originally surrounded by grave goods, now kept in a secure storeroom. For Ramadan, these grave goods could hold vital clues.
We found a full set of Shawabti figurines, something around 405. So this is a large number of those figurines.
Shaptis were symbolic servants, a workforce to help the dead enjoy an easier afterlife.
They're so important for archaeologists because usually we have them inscribed with the name of the deceased. Tadihor.
The occupant of the lone sarcophagus now has a name, Tadihor, and there's more.
Just by looking at this Shawabti figurine, we are 100% sure that the person buried here is a woman because it's a feminine name. Tadihor. This is a woman, definitely.
Archaeology has given Tadihor back her name. To investigate further, the team must now open her giant stone sarcophagus.
Tadihor is the only person with a single burial chamber, and it is a time to open it up and see why. There is so many questions and so many things to worry about. Biggest thing for me is what is inside this sarcophagus. Is a mummy inside or not?
They'll first try to raise the 5-ton lid just a few inches to see if there's a coffin or mummy inside. It's a task fraught with danger.
الجاكتا قلب لي العفريتة دي قلبة لي.
ناخد حاجة بقى يا دكتور.
My concern is that this slide toward the back and everything will fall. But they are assuring me that it's not going to happen this way.
تعملي عندك صلي يا خال يلا صلي الله ينور عليك.
The lid is open.
يلا يا عم سلطان عفريتنا وعدتنا بره. ماشي؟
Just enough to reveal what, if anything, is inside.
We get very excited when we have to open up something. We get this excitement. I've always think of it like a child on Christmas Eve.
A 100 feet beneath the desert, Ramadan is on the brink of discovering what's inside Tadihor's sarcophagus.
Yeah, I think we're in a position to get a little peek inside. Oh my God. This is fantastic. what a privilege to be able to look at something that has been hidden and concealed from the eyes of humans for 2,600 years.
Having found Tadihor's mummy, Ramadan will now see if it can tell him why she was buried alone.
Can I have the endoscope?
The inspection camera gives him a closer look.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's amazing. I could see what I think is a wooden coffin. And I think some inscriptions on it. I'm not sure though. This excitement is killing everybody around here.
If it's a decorated coffin, as Ramadan suspects, then it would have been expensive, a clue that Tadihor had an elaborate funeral. As the team continues inching up the lid, Ramadan delves further into the meaning of Tadihor's grave goods.
If you imagine the entombment of a person, it is a moment where there is a lot of people involved, a lot of specialists involved. Priests are involved in bringing this mummy into the tomb and reciting rituals and bringing all this assemblage of grave goods inside it and arrange it in a neat way that we found in it. There's a lot of action happening. This is one of the things we always think about, reconstruct this human action.
As well as Tadihor's Shabti figurines, the team has found a collection of other ritual objects, including jars, oil cups, and a jackal-headed charm.
But what I personally like the most is this model of a boat. It's symbolic because the Egyptians believed that the sun god has two boats in order to cross the sky. The main wish of every deceased person is to join the sun god in the journey into the afterlife.
Objects and rituals must have been important to Tadihor. To reveal why, project consultant Salima Ikram is 300 miles south of Saqqara, in a prime burial spot for ancient Egyptian royalty. The Valley of the Kings.
The ancient Egyptians had a really deep belief in the afterlife, and so a great deal of effort, economic wealth, and all sorts of things were put into making sure that the afterlife was going to be fantastic, because it really was an extension of this life, except better, and for eternity.
And having the right grave goods was essential.
Grave goods fall into two categories. The first is to help you get from this world to the next, so there are all sorts of magical and ritual objects that protect you or guide you. The second are things for your soul to feed on, things that you enjoy in the afterlife, the same way you did in this life. All of these objects will be put inside the tomb, as well as having paintings of them as insurance.
This tomb belonged to a queen called Tawosret and is about 600 years older than Tadihor's.
This is one of the most important images in the tomb because it shows the boat of the sun god Ra making his way across the night sky. Tadihor had a very sweet little boat in her tomb. It wasn't as grand as this thing, but she too was using this as her way of making it from this world into the next together with the sun god, so she too could live eternally.
But Tadihor's extensive set of grave goods is evidence of more than just her beliefs.
Grave goods are a very good clue as to telling us what status someone enjoyed in life. The fact that Tadihor is buried in a small chamber all by herself with these grave goods and a sarcophagus really do tell us that she was amongst the wealthier people in Saqqara.
The evidence is stacking up. It would appear Tadihor was an affluent woman. More clues may lie inside her stone sarcophagus.
We have to continue jacking it up. Definitely nerves. Every person here is absolutely focused.
Deep beneath the pyramids of Saqqara, in the cramped and humid conditions of K24, the team prepares to remove the vast stone lid of Tadihor's sarcophagus.
You're always thinking about the person who's buried in this sarcophagus. Who are you? Why are you in this single burial chamber alone?
They plan to slide the lid out on steel rollers.
هعرف اسحبه براحتي لكن ده مش هعرف اعمله كده
اشد واطلع براحتي.
But there's a disagreement between Amar, the site foreman, and Ayman, the project engineer.
Ayman is advocating for resting the rollers right on the edge of the sarcophagus itself. But Ammar is talking about a technology that he inherited and were passed down from one generation to another, that the rollers should be resting on wooden planks. So the question, on the edge of the sarcophagus or on wooden planks?
كده كده حط الضرفين يبقى اني احط الضرفين ده لو غرز في الخشب مش عارف اطلعه. مش هيغرز. انت بتقول صح بس انت فكيت كام تابوت قبل كده؟
فكينا يجي 10.
The final decision is that our rollers will be resting on the wood. The debate must end now. We need to get to work.
The team will make use of the large hallway outside Tadihor's burial chamber, rolling the 9-foot block of stone all the way out on wooden planks. In such a tight space, there can be no room for error. To insert the wooden planks, they must tilt the lid up further.
I always have a concern about the shifting and the tilting of this lid. If you think of a family car weighs just 1 ton, that stone is the same weight as 5 family cars. The tiniest mistake in this moment could be a grave mistake.
I'm worried about everything, so I have to take care of every minor thing. It's a very narrow place and too many people. Without a good balance, it will turn up quickly and it will crush anyone.
Absolutely, their life is on the line right now.
ان انت هتضغط على اللي ورا اكتر.
خش يا استاذ دراعك، خش يا استاذ، خش اللي بتنطمك 5 سم عندي. ايوه. ايوه.
I'm not gonna feel calm until everybody's safe out of this burial chamber and this lid is dragged out.
While work continues underground, project consultant Salima Ikram is at the surface, investigating another grave that puts Tadihor's expensive burial in perspective.
Oh my God. This is astonishing.
Close to the entrance of the tomb complex, this grave lies just beneath the desert sand.
1, 2, 3. Got it? Okay. None of these bones is fused, so it's not an adult. It's actually a child, probably between 8 to 11, 12 years old. You can see some of the hair, and then you can see part of the textiles from the mummification. And the coffin is not very elaborate, just a rectangular box into which the person was thrust. And so it's not as wealthy or prestigious a burial as the ones that are cut into a shaft that goes down for 30 meters.
This might be a humble grave, but its location, so close to K24, is important.
It's a desire to be within a sacred space, within a pure space, and a space where you have sort of good juju on your way to the afterlife. This shaft, filled with the burials of important people, was really a power spot. And this is why people wanted to cluster here, because it would give them that extra blessing, and quite possibly at half the price, because they didn't have to buy their own, major tomb, because they were just sucking off the power from everyone who was buried around them.
This modest grave is the other end of the spectrum from Tadihore's prestige solo burial.
It is very interesting to think about this complex as a business place offering different packages according to the economic abilities of every person coming into this establishment. If you don't have Tadihore's money, there is always cheap alternative.
Down in the tomb complex, a cloth goes in to protect Tadihore. And the sarcophagus lid is, at last, on the move.
يا مساء الله ينور تعال تعال يا جدي تعال تعال لا ما تصدق
What is happening right now, we're getting a look into the sarcophagus of Tadihore. The open sarcophagi that remained sealed, untouched for 2,600 years. This is one of these rare moments. I have to go in right now. I need to look inside the sarcophagus of Tadihore. I have to look. I need to go. This is fantastic. This is the first time since 2,600 years ago somebody takes a closer look at Tadihore. Just getting to meet this lady, feeling so connected to this woman. It's emotional. It's not just making a discovery. I've always loved the ancient Egyptians. Their contribution to human culture is immeasurable. To be able to meet one of those people, it's not just, it's something you can't describe. I think it's time that she can speak to us.
The tomb complex at Saqqara is finally giving up its secrets. After opening Tadihore's sarcophagus, Ramadan and the team must next make sense of its fragile contents.
Okay.
Watch out. There you go. So, this is our Tadihore.
This is so cool. You can see her face.
Yep.
Oh, Ramadan, this is amazing.
Ramadan's hunch has been confirmed. Tadihore's coffin is elaborately decorated.
I guess there's a lot of problems with humidity.
Yep.
So all the wood from this beautiful coffin is turned into dust.
Text painted on coffins can be an important source of information about the person inside.
So far, the only text we have is just naming her as Tadihore, but we don't have anything about her titles.
Huh. It's really weird to have such an elaborate burial and nothing really to indicate who she was.
But the very fact that she is here alone makes her very remarkable. It says something about women, financial independence, and autonomy over their wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Ancient Egyptian women were very powerful. So an ancient Egyptian woman could own property, choose whom she married, divorce people, disinherit people, engage in trade and exchange. They had more rights than most women did until the 1940s in Europe and the United States.
So will the faded inscriptions reveal anything more? As the coffin is crumbling to dust, Ramadan must wait while the team makes a copy of it using a technique called photogrammetry.
I need a lot of pictures from different angles. Then you can really get a good 3D model out of it.
Excavation is a destructive process. My team have had the privilege of looking at the coffin of Tatihor, and after that, it will be a pile of dust. But you know what? We're doing our job. We're saving this object, but in a different format. And this is what makes us so happy.
The 3D map of the burial complex now contains photogrammetry of Tatihor's coffin. The model provides a permanent, high-resolution record that can be studied in minute detail. And after noticing something in the model, Ramadan heads back to re-examine Tatihor's text.
The first thing that caught my eye is the name Tekem right here. That flat blue sign with the 3 dots underneath is pronounced Te, and then the faded basket sign underneath is pronounced Ke, and then the owl is M, so the 3 together are Tekem. Tekem, this demon guard, is the guard that protects the last gate to heaven. The Egyptians believed that a written word on a medium like a coffin here has a power. If this text is written on the coffin, this is pretty much a passport for Tatihor into heaven and eternity.
To shed light on Tatihor's passage to the afterlife, Salima is in the Valley of the Kings.
The ancient Egyptians believed that once you died, you had to go through this long journey to the afterlife, because the afterlife wasn't easy to get to. I mean, the route was beset by horrible things. There were spitting cobras, there were lakes of fire, and there were lots and lots of demons guarding the gates that you needed to go through.
Demon guards like Tekem and other obstacles could be overcome with certain instructions or spells written on tomb walls and coffins.
A lot of it is about knowing the name of the gatekeeper or the guardian, because that's where your power lies, in dominating them by knowing their name.
Royal tombs like this were richly decorated with spells, forming collections of texts, the most famous of which is known as the Book of the Dead.
The Book of the Dead is a guidebook, really. You use it as you would a guidebook on a journey to go from the life of the living and into eternal life where the dead live. So it was a terrifying proposition that if you were badly equipped, you couldn't make it. For an ancient Egyptian like Tatihor, you had to have these kinds of spells, otherwise you would not reach the afterlife.
Tatihor invested in text written on her coffin. Along with all her ritual grave goods, it was part of a premium funeral package to secure her the best possible afterlife. The next step is to try and find out more about the woman herself.
We still have a gap in our information about this remarkable woman, age, health condition. There's a lot of questions to be answered about Tadihor, and the only way to do that is by examining her body.
A task that begins with removing her fragile coffin lid.
It is my job to know more about this person. It is my job to tell everybody the story of this person. What the ancient Egyptian tried to do, spending all the money and the effort into a burial like this, they wanted to tell us a story. This is unbelievable.
In the tombs beneath Saqqara, Dr. Ramadan Hussein and his team prepare for the most delicate stage of their investigation so far. Now the coffin lid is off, they can examine Tadihor's mummy in detail.
Oh my God.
The mummy would have been wrapped in textiles and coated in resin, but most of that has been lost to time.
This heavy coating of this bitumen on the linen bandages, it's crumbling into pieces. And what we could see are the bones of Tadihor, arms, fingers, and also, of course, the skull. It seems that Tadihor has missed a couple of her teeth, the lower jaw and also the upper jaw.
Ramadan is most intrigued by the position of Tadihor's arms.
The left arm being crossed over the chest, and the right arm just extending along the body here, was pretty much restricted for women that has connection to the royal palace in some capacity or being a priestess. This position of the arms is definitely for a woman of a high status.
This indication of religious or even royal connections is startling, and further evidence not only of Tadihor's wealth, but also her social rank.
We inched closer to Tadihor. It's a process of unwrapping something, and every time you lift one thing, you feel like you're getting closer to that person. You're getting to meet this person and know more about her.
Tadihor's mummy is one piece of her story. And the complex itself contains other information about her burial. Scans and excavations reveal not just tombs, but also specific areas dedicated to the 70-day process of mummification. Tadihor would have been mummified on this very site.
Mummification was a very delicate and careful procedure surrounded by secrecy and ritual. Tadihor would have arrived at this complex as a dead body. She would have then been washed and anointed and taken into the embalming house, where she would have been basically processed. So her internal organs were removed, she was washed with palm wine, she was dried, then oils and unguents would have been anointed all over her body, and then she would have been wrapped up in linens before she was then taken and buried in this complex here. Embalmers themselves, of course, would be selling you different kinds of sort of plans for mummification. They could give you different levels of embalming. They could give you high-class resin, lower-class resin, fabulous oil, and not so fabulous oil. Are you using the finest linen or are you using coarse linen? It was all down to what you could afford and what kind of deal you made with the embalmers.
For the next stage of investigation, Ramadan and the team will use specialized equipment to X-ray Tadihor's delicate mummy, right here in the tomb complex. They're hoping that looking inside her mummy will reveal more about how she lived and the way she was embalmed.
The X-ray can help with a lot of information about the person, about the ritual practices, and also about the culture. I'm looking forward to see the mummy face to face.
For the X-ray, Tadihor must be lifted from her sarcophagus.
We can't really X-ray Tadihor while she is in the sarcophagus. We have tried, but the burial chamber is so narrow.
One slip, and her crumbling mummy could completely disintegrate.
Very good.
She was some remarkable woman. She was in this closed room for 2,600 years. And now we would like to know more about Tadihor.
Safely removed and wrapped in gauze to protect her delicate bones, it's time for Tadihor to give up her final secrets.
The story of a single person is wrapped in this linen and waiting for us to unwrap it.
شريف
100 feet down, in the oppressive heat of the tomb complex, Ramadan's team prepares to X-ray Tadihor's mummy.
We can learn so much about the individual, their age, their gender, their diet, their disease. We're trying to piece together evidence to reconstruct the story of a human.
Clear. Okay, shoot. Yeah, okay. This is very nice. I see the smoothness of a female skull. This is clearly skull of a woman. And the shape of the pelvis also indicates a woman.
X-rays provide hard evidence, allowing the team to make conclusive statements about Tadihor.
All the bones are fused, so this is an adult. She's likely more than 18 years old. And from the mild osteoarthritis in her spine, we would tell that she died in her 40s.
In terms of life expectancy in antiquity, this is an old age. 45 to 50, this is pretty old. And you don't reach that age unless you had access to good nutrition, which puts Tadihor in a certain socioeconomic status that is actually matching access to good nutrition and good food.
The X-rays offer yet more information.
Here I can see several objects, dense objects. It has a scallop shape, and this really seem to be amulets.
Amulets are small ritual objects paid for by the deceased and placed in the wrappings of their mummy.
Here is an amulet, which is the head rest. This is interesting. And yeah, and here, the Eye of Horus.
A headrest amulet symbolically protected the head for rebirth in the afterlife. Jewelry like scarab beetles symbolized the repeating cycle of life. A gemstone heart amulet represented Tadihor's wisdom, purity, and moral strength. And the Eye of Horus protected and regenerated the soul. For Ramadan, the X-rayed amulets are final evidence of Tadihor's wealth and status.
The mummy is lavishly decorated with amulets
everywhere. And it just confirms that what we've seen from the other burial equipment, the calcite canopic jars, the Shawabti figurines, the embalming cups, everything in this burial chamber says Tadi Hur was a woman of status.
And the ultimate proof of Tadi Hur's social standing, her lone sarcophagus in a chamber all of its own. As the team begins replacing Tadi Hur's sarcophagus lid, Ramadan has rekindled her life.
The return of this lid back into the burial chamber is not quite the end of the story of Tadi Hur. It's just the closure of one chapter. We will continue telling the story of Tadi Hur through our digital data. This is exactly what Tadi Hur hoped for. Her name to be remembered and her story to be told.
Tadi Hur's story began with a mystery. Why did this person have the only private chamber in a packed tomb complex?
We're trying to reconstruct the story of a person who lived here 2,600 years ago. Tadi Hur was a person of wealth, a person of status. She might have had it because of her family background. She might have had it because of her career as a working woman or as a priestess. But what we know is that we are in front of a remarkable woman.
It really is an indication of the status of women in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptian women commanded a great deal of power, prestige, wealth, and independence. So we really get a sense of the woman who had this tomb.
In the minds of the general public, archaeologists are always about discovering objects. But we're trying to reconstruct moments of history. So archaeology is not really about finding objects. We are about discovering and decoding knowledge that is put inside these objects. This is for us a lifelong research project.
Deep beneath the Egyptian desert, a team of archaeologists is preparing to open a 2,500-year-old sarcophagus.
This is surely one of the most intriguing burial chambers, and it contains the largest stone sarcophagus in this complex.
Inside may lie a mummified body.
When we find an object like this, the only thing we need to know is the person inside.
But there are signs that the stone casket has been tampered with.
I keep looking at this sarcophagus. It is not even. It is a little bit tilted. Then comes this part right here, where there's a mortar attached to the lid, but not to the box of the sarcophagus. So it tells me one thing. This lid has been opened at least once and resealed right here. But why? This is definitely a puzzle.
Inside the necropolis of Saqqara, archaeologist Dr. Ramadan Hussein updates his team on the latest findings from one of the most important sites in Egypt today. A newly discovered 2,500-year-old funeral home where ancient Egyptians, rich and poor, were mummified and laid to rest deep underground.
The significance of this mummification and burial complex lies in one fact, that we have never found an actual building that we can say securely this is where the preparation of the mummies took place.
The team is partway through investigating this unique site. Their findings are transforming our understanding of mummification, both as a religious rite and a business.
There were so many people being mummified in ancient Egypt that really it was one of the biggest industries that you have going.
The people who were working inside the complex here were not just embalmers. They were also business people.
To reach the complex, the team must descend a vertical shaft known as K24. At the bottom of this void, carved into the bedrock, lies a mysterious engraving.
We're now 30 meters deep, and we have this entrance that's about 2 meters wide. But what is so important about it is this engraving on the top. If you follow the outline from the feet to the chest, and this rounded depression would be the head. It looks exactly like a mummy. Once I saw this, I realized that we're pretty much coming into something that is related to mummies.
Further investigation has confirmed Ramadan's hunch. Laser scans of the site reveal an intricate network of shafts and passageways stretching 100 feet down and ending in a set of burial chambers from around 600 BC. In one of these chambers is a large stone sarcophagus weighing a colossal 12 tons. And today, the team begins the challenging task of investigating it.
This is surely one of the most intriguing burial chambers in this complex. The height of the ceiling is almost 3 meters high, and the room is about 4 meters in length. And it contains the largest stone sarcophagus in this complex that is almost as high as I am right now. And when we find an object like this, the only thing we need to know is the person.
Fortunately, that person left behind an important clue. When the chamber was first opened, the floor around the sarcophagus was covered in a thick layer of sand, containing a large number of grave goods connected to the rituals of mummification and burial. Among these sacred objects is a set of beautifully carved stone jars.
What we found here are these canopic jars, and they are containers of the organs that have been extracted during the mummification process, mummified and then stored inside these jars. They're important for an archaeologist because they're usually inscribed with the name of the owner of these canopic jars written here. That reed leaf, a falcon, a quail chick, and a T sign all together reads Iyawit. Iyawit literally means the old one or the wise one, and this old man with the walking stick. This is how Egyptians used to imagine old age.
Armed with a name, Ramadan now has another mystery to solve, and it surrounds Iyawit's sarcophagus.
I keep looking at this sarcophagus. It is not even and a little bit tilted. It's not in the correct position because it's not lined up with the box right here. Then comes this part right here where there's a mortar attached to the lid but not to the box of the sarcophagus. So putting together that position of the lid that is not lining up with the box, along with this mortar that is not meeting the edges of the box and the lid, it tells me one thing, that the old ceiling has been broken right here. And this lid lifted up at some point and repositioned, and I'm sure that it happened 2,600 years ago in antiquity.
If Ramadan is right, and a Yawet sarcophagus has been opened, then the worry is that it might have suffered the same fate as some other burials from the complex. Near the shaft leading to a Yawet's burial chamber is a small tomb known as L25. In it are 2 stone sarcophagi that archaeologist Mohammed Rihan has come to inspect.
We are now in the tomb L25. It's just in the east side of the embalming workshop. This tomb, it's only 4 meters deep, and it's really tiny, it's really small, as we see. When we first came down here, we saw the lid was beside the coffin, and the mummy here was completely destroyed. Just small fragments, as we see here, from wood, bones, and textiles. And as we see here, we are missing the main part of the mummy. We have only the head. And we was asking ourselves, what was going on in this tomb? Why was everything destroyed? What exactly happened here?
Based on the level of damage, there is only one explanation.
When archaeologists excavate tombs, 99.9% of the time, they've been robbed. And they were robbed sort of serially from the time of burial onwards. First, because people wanted the gold and the grave goods, and sometimes they just even wanted the beer and the wine that was in the tomb. So tombs have been robbed through the ages.
So could the broken seal on a Yawet sarcophagus be a clue that, like most coffins, it's been robbed? And if so, then by whom?
The first wave of tomb robbers tended to be the people who knew where the tombs were. So they could have been the workers who helped build the tombs or the priests who helped bury the dead.
To get to the bottom of this mystery, the team will need to open up the casket and look inside.
It is an important moment for all of us to discover what is inside it. This is a big question. We're waiting for an answer.
Outside Yawet's burial chamber, Egyptologist Dr. Ramadan Hussein and his team are about to begin the epic task of opening his giant 12-ton sarcophagus.
Getting ready to lift up this 2,600-year-old lid is very exciting and intense moment. It gets even more intense when you see what's inside.
With signs that the sarcophagus has been tampered with, Ramadan is anxious to discover whether it's been plundered by grave robbers. Since the lid alone weighs close to a full-sized elephant, lifting it will be no simple task. In charge of the operation is project engineer Dr. Ayman Hamed.
Moving this sarcophagus lid is a big challenge, I think.
Ayman is concerned by how Amar, the site's experienced foreman, is intending to jack up the lid.
You want to fit the tip of the jack like that and take it up. In this case, everything would collapse. What I think is safer is to slide the lid to the side, so we will create enough space to jack the lid safely and freely. I hope that he will understand this point of view.
When Ayman heads down the shaft, though, he discovers that Amar is using his own method.
ده مجرد ما هيطلع هيفلت منك. خلاص انت حر. بقول لك انا خطوتين ازق دي كده واجيب 2 جاك وارفع. خلاص خلصت على كده وحمل.
ماشي. حمل انا هنا في ايه؟ في الجبل ده. احنا مش عايزين نحمل في ده عشان ضعيف
ليه؟
هناك.
مين قال لك ضعيف؟ انا اللي اقول ضعيف ولا مش ضعيف؟
I'm furious because I don't like this way. I don't work in this way. They are working in the limits, and the limits never work. Always high risk. Let's see and pray no one get hurt.
I'm listening to Ayman and Ammar. The one thing that I can tell you is that they would never agree at the beginning. Ammar, my foreman, he is the descendant of foremen. He represents the collective memory of Egyptian archaeology. But I trust the two of them to find a common solution to the big task that we have right here.
After Ayman and Ammar agree on a compromise,
أقول لك حاجة زي ما أنت كده هات العفريت الطويلة دي.
Ramadan re-enters Iyawit's chamber to cast his eye over a new discovery.
During the preparation for lifting up the lid of Iyawit, we needed to clean up around it, and we were surprised to find an interesting jet pillar amulet. The jet pillar is the spine of the god Osiris, and it is the symbol of eternity and resurrection.
Amulets like this symbol of Osiris, lord of the underworld, played a crucial role in Egyptian burials by protecting the dead in the afterlife. And they were often accompanied by another type of magical item, designed to ward off evil spirits.
It is placed on top of a magical brick, the small mud magical brick. And it is very interesting because those were the two items that were missing from our inventory of the grave goods of Iyawit.
The richer the customer, the more money could be made from the provision of these objects.
Mummification was, like many other things, a business. And even the kinds of objects you had in your tomb, as well as your sarcophagus, canopics, it was all down to your pocket and what kind of deal you made with the embalmers.
And the supply of grave goods wasn't the only way a well-run funeral business could generate a profit. Carved into the side of K24, not far from the surface, is a chamber unlike any other in the tomb complex, housing more than a dozen burials.
So we're 9 meters from the top of the shaft and 21 meters from the bottom. And this is a large room that's been cut off the shaft, and it really acts like a mini burial chamber of its own. This room is filled with a variety of burials. And here, there's this lovely, beautifully cut limestone coffin or sarcophagus, and inside there's this mummy, which has a beautiful cartonnage covering. And cartonnage is basically, you know, like papier-mâché. But what's extraordinary is that it's gilded, and you can see this glint of the gold here shines through. So that's really a chic, upper-class, wealthy burial. Whereas this poor being over here, I don't even know if they were properly mummified at all. They might have been wrapped up in a shroud and placed in here because they're skeletonized. So these two people are really very different in wealth and status, because there you have sort of the Rolls Royce of burials, and here's something that's more like a little bicycle in comparison.
While it might seem strange to find such contrasting burials sharing the same space, for a funeral business, it was simply a matter of economics.
We have to remember that mummification is for the funeral home directors. For them, this was a business. And maybe initially this was a one-person grand burial, and then their descendants were checking up, and so the embalmers kept saying, oh, we've got some space here, and selling increasingly economical spaces for people to be buried in. And so, like funeral directors today, they had to make sure that they kept making a profit.
And this raises an interesting new possibility, because if these business-savvy embalmers were prepared to reuse a tomb, then why not Iyawit's sarcophagus.
The fact that the lid itself is a little bit tilted, when you see such misalignment, this is very intriguing. It's something going to make us think about the possibility of a reuse of this sarcophagus 2,600 years ago. Maybe it was resold to Iyawit to make profit.
To find out, Ramadan must look inside. And with the lid finally free of its base, that moment has now come.
So far, we're about 17 centimeters up. So we're going to use a camera to get a peek at what's inside.
It's good news. Although the sarcophagus's contents have eroded with time, nothing appears to be missing, making it a rare and important find.
When you deal with a lid that has been lifted up once in antiquity, you think possibly the burial chamber was robbed. But I don't see that. Just adjust it a little bit. I clearly see that there is a number of wooden objects and possibly something else. We have what looks like a broken vessel placed at the feet of the mummy here. The inside of this sarcophagus, everything is in place, and it was 2,600 years ago.
Which leaves Ramadan with only one possible explanation for Iyawit's open sarcophagus: that it's been reused. The question now, though, is for what reason?
And the only way to find out is by jacking up the lid more and be able to get inside and find out what is happening with this mummy.
Inside Iyawit's burial chamber, workers are continuing the precarious task of opening his giant 12-ton sarcophagus. By examining its contents, Project Director Ramadan is hoping to discover why the sarcophagus has been reused, and so get an insight into the running of this unique complex.
The fact that this lid has been moved at least once in antiquity and then put back on the box of the sarcophagus says something important about the embalmers who ran this establishment 2,600 years ago, that they had a business mentality.
Ramadan believes that this same business mentality is why the embalmers chose to build their funeral home where they did. For over 3,000 years, the vast necropolis of Saqqara served as the main cemetery for the ancient city of Memphis. Its sprawling mass of tombs and temples date back to the very earliest days of the Egyptian kingdom. And towering high above them all, the oldest stone pyramid in the world. The magnificent Step Pyramid of King Djoser, dating from the 27th century BC and built to house Djoser's remains, along with tens of thousands of his grave goods.
I've never been up here. You feel so little in front of these magnificent buildings. This is amazing for me. This is a spot in the landscape that is so significant religiously. If you stood here 2,600 years ago,
You would smell the incense burned everywhere. You would hear the sacrificial animals. You would see a place where the Egyptians were buried for thousands of years.
Ramadan is convinced that the close proximity of his funeral complex to this and other landmarks of Saqqara would have been a major draw for customers like Iyawet.
It's important to put in perspective the spatial relationship between our complex and the two great landmarks of Saqqara. From here, on top of the step pyramid, we can glance over to see the site of the mummification workshop where we work, right behind the pyramid of King Unas. It is so close, and I do believe it will be on the minds of people using our mummification complex that if you're buried there, you'll be very close to two great kings, Unas and Zoser. And this is what made it prime real estate.
With the dig team still hard at work, Ramadan heads back underground to check up on progress. Iyawet's enormous 4-ton lid is being raised using a pair of steel jacks. Every step is fraught with danger. And to make things even tougher, the temperature in the chamber is an energy-sapping 95 degrees.
It's
going on pretty well, but you always have to be careful.
Finally, after 5 hours of jacking, the lid is high enough to give Ramadan a proper look at Iyawet's wooden coffin.
Every time we open a sarcophagus and handle a coffin, we get a closer look at the person inside it. And now it's time to meet that person.
Deep beneath the pyramids of Saqqara, inside Iyawet's burial chamber, Ramadan is examining his ancient wooden coffin. He's searching for clues that might explain why Iyawet's sarcophagus has been opened and reused.
What we see here is a badly decayed coffin. Like every other coffin in this complex, unfortunately, it's been disintegrated, what we call thermodisintegration. It happens to wood because of high temperature and high humidity over 2,600 years, and also insect infestation that feeds on the wood and turns the wood into dust.
As he carefully brushes away what's left of the coffin, Iyawet's 2,500-year-old skull is revealed.
This area, that looks like a face.
I can't really make out clearly, but I could see the lower jaw here with nice set of teeth right here.
And beneath the skull, something else.
I'm getting this archaeologist curiosity right now, and I should be controlling it, but I could see that there is a layer of sand placed right here underneath this coffin. The pit inside here is not as deep as it should be. The question is this coffin placed on top of another coffin? Is there another coffin underneath the one we're seeing right now?
If the sand in Iyawet's sarcophagus does hide a second coffin, then it would reinforce the notion of a funeral home with a keen eye for business.
Either there is another burial, a second burial, lying in the bottom of the sarcophagus, and the other option is the original coffin was taken out of the sarcophagus and then it was reassigned to the Iyawet.
The only way of knowing whether the sarcophagus contains two burials or one is to remove Iyawet's mummy, a task that will further damage it. Which is why digital archaeologist Matthias Lung is first making a 3D model of Iyawet.
One of the basic challenges of archaeology is that we always want to know what is below the things we are seeing now. What is beneath it? And to know it, we have to demolish the sarcophagus and the mummy. So the best way to preserve these artifacts is to make a perfectly scaled 3D model.
Matthias is using a digital imaging technique called photogrammetry. It involves combining hundreds of overlapping photographs.
So I just move around and I sneak into every single corner, into every angle, to have a very, very detailed picture of everything.
By modeling the various stages of the dig, Matthias and his team are building a visual timeline of the project from beginning to end.
I think 3D technology is perfectly suited for archaeology because you can revisit the site as often as you want.
Iyawet's finished model is scrutinized by Ramadan and Salima.
So I would like to show you something really interesting. It's like this, you can see the bottom of it.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
This makes me so happy to look at a mummy that is very decayed, but you still preserve it in a digital format.
It's wonderful because, especially with mummies that are so fragile.
The 3D model depicts not only Iyawet's sarcophagus, but also his mummy. And Ramadan quickly spots a fascinating detail.
And look at that arm position.
Wait a minute, they're both crossed.
Yep.
Oh, that's so cool.
To Egyptologists, a mummy's arm position can be highly significant, often denoting its class or gender. Originally, the only people allowed the crossed arm position were the pharaohs. So the discovery that Iyawet's arms are crossed is unusual to say the least.
How often do you see this?
You do see it. It does happen. I mean, it's only kings, really, in the New Kingdom, and then in this time period, the only ones I've ever seen have all belonged to priests. So with these crossed arms, it's more than likely he was a priest.
It's an intriguing theory, and not just for what it says about Iyawet, but also the owners of the site. Because having priests for customers meant dealing with some of the wealthiest people in ancient Egypt.
Priests were really a cornerstone of ancient Egyptian society. They had power, they had wealth, and they had influence. So the fact that priests were buried here means that this was a very elite burial place.
And Iyawet isn't the only wealthy priest to be buried at the complex. Because on the coffin of another priest, Ramadan recently unearthed one of the most valuable ancient Egyptian artifacts to appear in the last 100 years.
We have discovered something that will definitely, the entire world will be talking about.
While his team prepare to remove Iyawet's mummy, Ramadan has come to Cairo's famous Egyptian Museum to be reunited with an object that offers a fascinating insight into the status of priests like Iyawet. An exquisite gilded silver burial mask belonging to another priest from the complex.
Very rare object. You don't find something like this every day.
Unlike gold, which could be found throughout Egypt, most silver at the time of the pharaohs had to be imported, making it one of the most precious substances around.
Silver was, economically speaking, like a currency, almost double the value of gold. Every commodity would be valued against silver. But also, the Egyptians always believed that the bones of the gods were made of silver. Their flesh and skin were made of gold. This is the purpose of having this silver plate covered with a gold foil, is one step toward transformation of the dead into a god, into a divine.
That such a valuable item belonged to a priest is a measure of just how wealthy they could be, with a status second only to that of Egyptian royalty. To learn more about the composition of the mask, head conservator Mu'amin Uthman has been analyzing its metal content by bombarding it with X-rays and measuring the unique chemical fingerprint given off in return.
I'm really curious to know the purity of the silver and also the purity of the gilded layer.
The gilded layer in this part here, we found the concentration of the gold, it's 60%.
Music to my ears. I'm also interested to know the purity of the silver plate.
It's so strange because we found the concentration of silver from the pack. 99%.
99 what?
99.07.
Oh my God.
It's almost pure silver.
Purer even than sterling silver, which has a concentration of just 93%.
It's just shocking to me how pure this silver plate is. Have you seen something like this?
No, till now I haven't seen something like this yet, with this high concentration of silver.
I just got the briefing from Dr. Mu'min, and the results are overwhelming for me because the purity of the silver and the purity of the gold, it's a certain kind of wealth that we haven't seen before. We see it only with royals, not with commoners.
While these results are further confirmation that priests could be extremely wealthy, they're also evidence of something else. A successful funeral business offering its clients the very best goods and services that money could buy. Clients like Iyawet, furnished with the largest sarcophagus in the entire complex. The question that needs answering now is whether Iyawet is in there alone. Back inside the burial chamber, the team is carefully removing Iyawet's crumbling mummy.
1 2 3
With the sarcophagus empty, Ramadan can now see whether there is a second coffin underneath.
I came down here to inspect this layer of sand underneath the mummy to make sure whether there is another burial underneath it or not. And the only thing that we can do is just do a little bit of scraping in here. And I could hear the sound of this brush on the bottom rock of the sarcophagus. Which means we have only one burial in here.
And because there's only one burial, the answer to the mystery of Iyawet's open sarcophagus is that it must have once belonged to someone else.
It looks as if maybe there was another burial there first and then Iyawet is a secondary burial. This is certainly possible because the ancient Egyptians often did that. They reused tombs. And often this was done because there was limited space.
A reuse of a sarcophagus. This really speaks about the embalmers who were running this establishment. They maximized the use of space to make profit out of it.
Having solved this first mystery, Ramadan's final task is to go back and re-examine Iyawet's grave goods to see if any more can be learned about this wealthy priest. Inside a secure storeroom, a team of conservators is carefully boxing up some of Iyawet's many grave goods.
For an archaeologist to really know a person from the archaeological record, you need the material culture, all the objects deposited with the person around him.
Ramadan is hoping to discover some more about Iyawet by taking a closer look at his canopic jars.
Canopic jars are a crucial part of one's funerary equipment because they are supposed to contain the internal organs. So it's one's for the lungs, one's for the liver, one's for the intestines, and one's for the stomach. So that when you die or when you're resurrected, you can be put together again.
It's because canopic jars contain remnants of these organs that the team is taking one for a CT scan, in case it holds clues about Iyawet's life.
We're so excited. We finally get to the point where we can explore what is inside. It's a big moment.
Oh my God.
This is heavy.
Oh, this is beautiful. Beautiful and heavy. This is awesome.
So we've taken this canopic jar of Iyawet in a very exciting trip today. And we have this beautiful human-headed jar representing the god Emsti, one of the four sons of Horus, that washed over the organs, the mummified organs of the deceased. And Emsti was the god in charge of protecting the liver. So inside this vessel, we should see the liver of Iyawet.
Using multiple X-rays taken from different angles, the scanner combines them to create a 3D image. Helping Ramadan interpret the results is Professor Sahar Salim.
Okay, can we scroll? It seems to me that there is something in the center. Folds,
So the wrappings.
Wrapping, and I can see even the folds. And what seems to be inside is one big tissue that it is compact. When we measure it, it's about 14 centimeters. And the only organ in the body that can fit with all these criteria is the liver.
After the scans confirm that the jar does contain Iyawet's liver, Ramadan and Sahar are struck by something else.
Remember that it shrunk a bit.
It shrinks, yeah.
Just how big the liver is for an organ that's 2,500 years old.
It's fascinating how large this liver is still, although it should have shrunk a little bit, but it's still large.
Yeah. This is amazing. Did this guy have a sort of a liver disease? This is something that we have to think about.
This is very surprising. This liver enlargement, you think it's because of a disease?
Yeah.
What would cause that?
It is something that many of the Egyptians, they have, schistosomiasis.
Schistosomiasis is caused by parasitic worms from polluted rivers and lakes, burrowing under the skin and infecting vital organs such as the liver. Could Iyawet's enlarged liver be a clue that this is how he met his end?
It's fascinating, your observation about cause of death of Iyawet. That is amazing for me. This is absolutely remarkable.
And it's by no means the only thing the team has learned about the man called Iawet.
When we write the story of Iawet, we have to think about his name. Iawet means old person or wise man. And it says something about this person having achieved a certain socioeconomic status.
Iawet had a very nice sarcophagus. He had calcite canopic jars. He had little shabtis. Plus, he's got these wonderful crossed arms that is done for certain priests. So obviously he was a man of substance.
Crucially, Iawet's burial is also providing Ramadan and his team with a fascinating insight into the business of mummification.
When we first examined the sarcophagus of Iawet, we were confronted with a mystery. That is, the lid was a little bit tilted. We think now that the entire sarcophagus, maybe the entire burial chamber, has been reassigned or resold to Iawet to make profit out of it.
What's extraordinary is that this whole funerary complex was used again and again, so they could make sure that they kept making a profit.
This site is very special because we don't have something like this in the archaeological record of Egypt. It talks about the economics of mummification. And so this is what keeps us really want to come back every season, every year to work in this place.
In a tomb deep underground, archaeologists carefully remove the lid from an ancient stone sarcophagus. Inside lie the mummified remains of an Egyptian priest, hidden for the past 2,500 years.
Oh my God. This is beautiful.
On closer inspection, though, the mummy isn't what it seems.
No way.
And the investigation takes a surprise turn.
There is something quite mind-blowing.
Forcing the team to question all that it's found so far.
I might be wrong, but I would be very surprised if there is no more surprises in this complex.
Inside the ancient cemetery of Saqqara, renowned Egyptologist Dr. Ramadan Hussein and his team of archaeologists are excavating a remarkable new site.
When I started archaeology, I never thought I would be discovering something on that magnitude.
Extensive 3D scans reveal a unique ancient Egyptian funeral complex dating from around 600 BC, where the dead were brought to be mummified and buried in an assortment of chambers deep underground.
This tomb complex dates to the 26th dynasty, and that's about 700 years after Tutankhamun and about 600 years before Cleopatra and the end of Egyptian history as we knew it. This time period is interesting because this is when Egypt had had a huge renaissance in religion and burial ideas. So this find is really a snapshot in time and crucial to our understanding of mummification.
Today, Ramadan and his team are investigating a pair of stone sarcophagi. They lie in a small chamber, almost 100 feet below the surface.
We have two sealed sarcophagi. One in what we call anthropoid sarcophagus,
It means it takes the human form, and another one that is a rectangular sarcophagus.
What makes them so special is that unlike the other sarcophagi in this complex, they're both inscribed with text.
Once we discovered this writing, we understood how valuable this is. So we have put protective paper here. This is our means of communication with the ancients.
The inscriptions are carved on one sarcophagus and painted on the other. And they provide fascinating clues about the people buried inside.
For me, it is a moment that I can read the minds of these two persons to be able to know what they wanted to convey us, what they wanted to tell us.
The ancient Egyptians believed that remembering the name of the deceased by writing it down would lead to their immortality. And the text on the caskets reveals a pair of male names, Chanamit and Yiput. But the text also contains another vital piece of information, their jobs. And interestingly, they both match.
So far, from the text material we have collected, we have two priests. This is Chanami. Right behind me here is another priest, and his name is Yiput.
While this is priceless information, it raises an important question. Why are these two priests here? Is it purely by chance that they share the same tomb? Or could they be, in some way, connected?
That is pretty much the mystery. Why do you have two priests right next to one another? This is a question to be answered when we lift up this lid.
To learn more about the two priests, Ramadan must open up the sarcophagi and investigate their contents in forensic detail. Led by their foreman, Amar, the team is starting with the rectangular sarcophagus of Chanamit. The first task is to break open the thick layer of mortar running round the edge of the lid. Intended as a seal to deter grave robbers, its presence can mean only one thing.
This sarcophagus is 2,600 years old, and it hasn't been touched since Chanamit was buried inside it. This is a three-man job, so we'll see how successful this is going to be. It is a very intense moment for me. What is inside this sarcophagus? It seems to be working. Line up.
Now the casket is partway open. Ramadan uses an inspection camera to take a preliminary peek.
This is unbelievable.
What it reveals is like nothing else from the complex.
Glittering stuff.
A 2,600-year-old mummy, adorned from head to toe in an elaborate beaded burial shroud. And amazingly, still in one piece.
This beautiful beaded net. It is so elegant. This is so beautiful.
not as pristine as you would see it in museums, but this is a mummy that carries the dust and aging of 2,600 years. This is a remarkably decorated mummy. This definitely stands out as one of the most remarkable sarcophagus that I have ever opened. I have a job to bring Chanami back to life. We want his story to be told. And I think I'm going to tell the story of Chanami from now until I die. I have so much to do.
Beneath the ancient pyramids of Saqqara, the task of opening Chanamit's stone sarcophagus is well underway. After glimpsing a beaded shroud lying on Chanamit's mummy, project director Ramadan is keen to learn more about this mysterious priest.
Ammar and his team has just lifted up the lid. It's a difficult job. It's a lot of labor, a lot of sweat. Before we roll it out, we need to make sure that nothing will fall on this beautiful mummy. So we're spreading a cloth underneath the lid. Line out. Ammar, we're good to go.
The lid, carved from solid limestone, weighs almost 2,000 pounds. And the team will slide it out on steel rollers.
When you move a large piece of stone like this lid, you don't want this stone to smash somebody's bones. That's first. Second is not to damage and destroy any object inside the sarcophagus. So those are the two main concerns. The safety of the living and also the safety of the dead. Now, I think we're gonna have a full look at the mummy of Chanamit. Oh my God, it's just unbelievable. It is as if actually it was made yesterday. This is beautiful.
Made from hundreds of glazed clay beads, Chanamit's perfectly preserved burial shroud was intended to protect him in the afterlife. Its quality and craftsmanship are a clear sign that Chanamit was a wealthy individual.
This is the work of an artist that was done 2,600 years ago. And now we're getting a first look at it, a bit by bit. The collar is coming out. It's so beautiful, also beaded right here. The head of the mummy. He's still wrapped. You can see his eyes, and the nose, and the eyebrows, and even the mouth drawn on this linen bandages. This is one of the most beautiful mummies I have ever seen in my life. What is so amazing is the preservation of the beaded net and the necklace after 2,600 years. It's unbelievable. It's just beautiful. But now, the question that is on my mind, who is this person to have deserved such an elaborate burial?
To shed light on why a priest like Chanamit was able to afford such luxuries, project consultant Salima Ikram has come to one of the most iconic sites in all of Egypt. The historic city of Luxor on the banks of the River Nile. Among the many nearby tombs is a vast mausoleum belonging to a priest called Pariamanopet.
It was always in ancient Egypt good to be a priest because, of course, religion was of the utmost importance, and also you enter into this hierarchy of the temples and the religion, and so it's sort of like a brotherhood.
For most priests, serving one of the many Egyptian gods or goddesses was a full-time job. But for an elite few, like Pariamanopet, it was a career that brought wealth and status.
One of the most striking things about Pariamanopet's tomb is the fact that it is huge. It's the largest non-royal tomb in all of Luxor. The workmanship is exquisite and it's lavishly decorated, and it would originally have been painted, and you can still see some of the vestiges of paint, which means that he must have been one of the richest and most influential men when he died.
Almost every wall of this enormous 22-room tomb is covered in either paintings or inscriptions. And they contain important information about Pariamanopet's life, including how he was able to amass such wealth.
Priests were very important in Egyptian society, and Pariamanopet here, you can see, was a priest, a lector priest, someone who reads. But he was also a royal scribe, he was known to the king, was a courtier, and he, like many other priests, had lots of jobs. So priests weren't just religious beings. They were political, they were industrial, some of them were even in the military. They really had their fingers in all kinds of pies. And so you wind up with people who have enormous wealth that they can amass from a huge number of different sources.
So could Chanamit's elaborate burial be a clue to the sort of life he led as a priest? Ramadan is hoping to find some answers in the painted text on his sarcophagus, now that its protective covering is being removed.
Text is so valuable for every archaeologist. It is that joy to be able to read the minds of the ancients. What we're reading here is, if we can draw any analogy, an identification card of this person. And right here, for example, we see the name of the deceased, Chanamit, which literally means the little child of the cat. The worship of the cat among Egyptians was very, very common, and it was notably common among a segment of the Egyptian society that is mostly Libyan immigrant. So the name Chanamit, could that be an indication that we're dealing with a Libyan descent of some sort?
And Chanamit's heritage isn't all that's contained in the inscription.
So working backwards, we see some of his priestly titles. Here, for example, we could see that he is a priest of the goddess Sekhmet and the goddess Isis, two of the most important goddesses in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. Then we continue to see more of his priestly titles.
In other words, just like the priest Pariamanopet, Chanamit held more than one position.
We're talking about somebody who had evidently a long career as a priest. This must be somebody who accumulated a certain kind of wealth.
So what brought such a distinguished priest here to Saqqara?
This burial chamber has already given us a lot to think about.
And how if at all, is Chanamit connected to Yiput, the other priest buried in the chamber? Inside the priest's burial chamber, Ramadan's team is preparing to remove Chanamit's mummy from the sarcophagus so they can examine it for more clues.
A little bit up, a little bit to the right.
As there's a chance of damaging the mummy, the project's digital team is first creating a perfect copy using a technique called photogrammetry.
So, first of all, I took like thousands of pictures of this mummy, and we can put all these pictures then in a software.
And then the computers figures out what we have done with all the pictures and creates out of all pictures a 3D model.
And it's a complete new approach understanding archaeological sites like this.
Especially when they're underground.
The 3D map of the tomb complex now contains Chanamit's open sarcophagus. And the real beauty of this technique is that it records each stage of the excavation, allowing the team to go back and re-examine key details, like the faded text on Chanamit's sarcophagus, where Ramadan has spotted a mysterious name.
We're looking now at the titles of Chanamit, connecting him to several gods and goddesses from ancient Egypt, very prominent ones. But what is so intriguing here is that he's a priest of a goddess, a serpent goddess. Her name is Nuches, with this circle, then a rectangular below it, then a bolt, and at the end, a serpent. When I first saw the name Nuches, I had trouble reading it because we don't see that name a lot. It sounds really very strange.
While this latest discovery is an important development, it now leaves Ramadan with a new set of questions. Who was this obscure serpent goddess? And why was a priest of some of the most important deities in Egypt in her service? In search of clues, project consultant Salima is once more in the city of Luxor.
We're here at Luxor Temple, which is one of the most important temples in this area because it contains lists of gods and goddesses. And if we're in search of a particular deity, this would be the place to go.
Among the many hieroglyphs covering the temple walls is what's brought her here. A tiny but familiar-looking inscription.
And it's right up here, where you've got that circle up there, the cross in it. And beneath that, there's a funny hook and this lovely snake.
One of the very few mentions of Nut Shayez to be found anywhere in Egypt.
And in fact, this is the first time her name occurs ever.
What's significant is the inscription's location. Inside a separate chapel within the temple, dedicated to one of the most eminent of all Egyptian deities, the great goddess Mut.
Mut was so important because she was the consort of the god Amun, king of the gods. So basically, she's queen of the gods, and Mut is also the great mother goddess. And in fact, the word for mother in Egyptian is Mut. And she was in charge of the fertility of the land, the people, the herds, and a great protector of women.
Mut was so revered by the ancient Egyptians that they depicted her in many different ways. As the mother of the pharaoh, as a powerful ruler, even as a lioness.
And so here, In this chapel, we have Mut in all of her different guises and all of her different aspects.
And one of Mut's other lesser-known guises was the serpent-like Nut Shayez.
Here you see that Nut Shayez is really just an aspect of the goddess Mut, and an aspect in serpent form, like you can see from her name. She's not very significant, it would seem. And there are only a handful of mentions of this very elusive mythological figure that we have throughout Egyptian history. Now, 600 years later, at Saqqara, in the tomb of Chanamit, it's a different story, because Chanamit is a priest of the goddess Nut Shayez, and this means suddenly Nut Shayez is an independent entity. Suddenly, she becomes somebody.
A fully fledged goddess in her own right. And what's remarkable is that Chanamit wasn't alone in worshipping this new deity. In a small tomb next to the priest's chamber, Ramadan and his team have made an extraordinary discovery. A mummy wearing a priceless gilded silver burial mask, the first found in Egypt for almost a century. One of the fascinating things about this find is that the text on the coffin reveals that its owner was a priest, just like Chanamit, and that he too worshipped the serpent goddess Nut Shayez. Which means that Nut Shayez must have become a very significant goddess indeed.
All of a sudden, in our complex here, we have two individuals that connecting themselves to the goddess Nut Shayez, being priests of this goddess. This is definitely a revolution in what we know about this goddess. We're hoping for more information about her.
In light of the discovery that Chanamit was a follower of the obscure serpent goddess Nut Shayez, Ramadan is keen to find out more about the other priest from Chanamit's tomb.
Today is going to be a very interesting day because our attention turns to the second sarcophagus in the burial chamber that we've been working in, and now it's the time to learn more about Yiput.
He is hoping that a closer inspection of Yiput's casket might reveal why the two priests share the same tomb.
The sarcophagus of Yiput stands out in this complex because it is the only anthropoid sarcophagus, a human form sarcophagus. And you could see the fingerprint of the person who applied this mortar in the process of sealing the lid.
Anthropoid sarcophagi were intended to portray an ideal of Egyptian beauty. And on Yiput's, Ramadan spots an intriguing detail.
Interestingly, you could see the face here. That very triangle-shaped nose, this very pointed, very sharp nose, and that very thin lips, it is not Egyptian facial features. It looks to me like possibly a foreign person. And the sarcophagus is inscribed, giving us the name of the person who was buried inside, Yiput. It's very interesting because it doesn't sound like an Egyptian name. It does sound a foreign name, particularly Libyan name. Something similar to what we've seen with Chanamit.
If Ramadan is right, and both Chanamit and Yiput were of Libyan descent, then could that explain why they share the same tomb? Remarkably, the links don't stop there, because the inscriptions on Yiput's sarcophagus also reveal the gods whom he served, and they include a now familiar name. On the foot of Yiput's casket is the telltale symbol of a serpent. The same goddess Yut Shayez, Ramadan saw on Chanamit sarcophagus, and the coffin of the priest with the silver mask.
There are strong similarities and connections between these two persons. One is both of them were priests. Second, they served the same goddess, Newchest. Third, both of them possibly Libyans, possibly Libyan immigrants who settled in Egypt.
دكتور حط الأرض. حط الاثنين ماشي.
In the search for more evidence, the team's next step is to look inside Yiput's sarcophagus.
إيه لا. إيه لا. الله ينور. كمان واحدة.
عمار في مساحة قد إيه؟
في 3 سم اهو يا دكتور. هنزل برضه وهيجي معايا. هاخد قدام ده. طيب. على الحبيب. إيه أهو. الله ينور.
الله ينور.
كمان واحدة. الله ينور. الله ينور.
We are in a very tight space.
خش يا عم حمدي. على الحبيب خش.
And we have to move this human-sized lid.
إيه لا. الله ينور.
They have to maneuver, turn around, and make sure nothing falls inside the sarcophagus that could damage the mummy.
إيه لا.
الله ينور.
كمان واحدة.
عمار
حبشة دكتور.
عمار
حبشة دكتور.
عشان ما يجريش تحت على رجل عم حمدي كده ومحمد.
لا ما تخافش يا دكتور ما انا معتل من هنا. ايه ده؟ الله ينور يا عم حمدي. ايه ده؟ كمان واحدة. ايه ده؟ الله ينور. ايه ده؟
لا استنى يا عمار استنى يا عمار. عمار
طب دي واحدة ساب الضرفين اللي هو
عمار خدوا نفسكم.
While the team has a rest, Ramadan takes a quick look inside Yiput's sarcophagus.
This is beautiful. What we have here is a mummy similar to Chanamit's mummy. Similar mummification technique for the two of them. It's very interesting. We see a lot of beads at the feet of this mummy. Looks like they were put around the mummy, not really threaded. And this is something that I haven't seen before. So we need to look closely to the face and the body of Yiput.
الحبيب يلا. ايه لا. خلي بالك خلي بالك. تمام يا باي. ما تخافش.
الخشبة جريت. الخشبة جريت. دي جريت معاه.
طيب. ايه لا. الله ينور. ها. الله ينور. يلا ايه. اللهم صل. لا احنا فصلنا احنا. الله حبيبي.
Finally, for the first time in 2,600 years, Yiput's mummy is fully revealed.
That very beautifully wrapped mummy coated with this black bitumen. You could see the old bandage here, the mummy wrappings right here.
Looking closer, Ramadan tries to make sense of the shape of the body beneath the mummy wrappings. And he spies something totally unexpected.
There is something quite mind-blowing. Looking at the sarcophagus of Yiput and the text and his name that is written right here and the title being a priest of Newchest, all speaks to me as a man. But now looking at the mummy, I'm seeing something different. You could see a silhouette of that left arm over the chest, and then another protrusion here, possibly the right shoulder, going all the way down along the body. So what we have here is the left arm crossed over the chest, while the right arm extended along the body and possibly reaching the pelvic area. This is a position that is restricted to women of high status.
In other words, What the arm position suggests is that instead of being a priest of Nut Shayez, Yiput may, in fact, have been a priestess.
All these months I'm talking about Yiput as a man, and all of a sudden I have a mummy with a hand on arm position that is for a woman. I might be wrong, but I would be very surprised if there is no more surprises in this complex. Now we need to have this question answered and the identification of the sex of this mummy confirmed by X-ray.
After the shock discovery that the priest Yiput may in fact be a woman, Ramadan is keen to reinvestigate the sex of another of the priests from the complex, the priest with the gilded silver mask.
You're thinking it's male?
Yeah, but now we might have a very big surprise in terms of the sex of this mummy.
Now that the painted wooden coffin has been removed, project consultant Salima is able to identify a crucial telltale feature.
I mean, certainly I can see from the brow, it's quite sharp. That's certainly a female trait, but it's quite extraordinary.
Just as revealing is the mummy's crossed arm position.
When you have one arm crossed over your breast and one along your side, that poses something that is only seen with female mummies. And so the fact that this body has the same pose would really argue, in addition to all of the physical characteristics on the skeleton, that this is a woman.
This is a surprise.
The potential discovery of a second priestess is a fascinating development.
Having priestesses buried here is significant because it tells us what ancient Egyptian women were like and what their social status was. They had the same social economic class, they had the same level of wealth, the same level of prestige and privilege. And really, it emphasizes the point that in ancient Egypt, more than any other ancient culture, women had many more rights and were far more equal to men than elsewhere.
To be sure of the priest's sex, though, what Ramadan needs is hard evidence. So he's arranged for the mummies to be X-rayed. Starting with the priest Chanamit.
It's completely decayed, so I'm trying to lift the mummy one piece, but I think it's very hard.
Held together by a protective gauze.
اتنين تلاتة.
Okay, ارفع.
ارفع ارفع.
The fragile mummy is carefully lifted out.
انزل يا محمد. ارفع فوق كمان، ارفع فوق كمان. برافو برافو برافو. كمان سنة ودخله. Okay. Yes, good work. Yeah, we get the mummy one piece.
As the remains are too delicate to be hoisted to the surface, the team has created an X-ray lab underground.
It is okay because the stones is collected together or near together, so we can make an X-ray. It will be a good result for us.
Radiologist Professor Sahar Salim will X-ray the mummy in stages.
Okay, clear, please.
Starting with the head.
Okay, shoot. Wow. Unfortunately, this doesn't look good.
It's disappointing news.
This doesn't look good at all. The skull is so scrambled.
Chanamit's skull is too damaged to glean any information from it.
Unfortunately, I cannot tell whether this is a man or a woman. So we'll go to the other clues to determine the sex. I'm counting now on the pelvis.
Female pelvises are usually wider and rounder than a male's,
Shoot.
making them a reliable indicator of sex.
It is bad news.
Unfortunately, the pelvis is totally destroyed. You cannot see any recognizable part of the hip.
Unable to tell Chanamit's sex, the team switches to Yiput, the priest with the male name, but the female-looking mummy.
Yiput is a mummy that keeps me thinking all the time. The name is for a man. The title is for a priest. But we're still really not sure whether Yiput is a man or a woman.
A 100 feet beneath the desert, inside a makeshift lab, radiologist Sahar Salim is getting ready to x-ray the 2,500-year-old mummy of Yiput, the priest.
Where, please?
She's hoping the scans will confirm whether Yiput's skeleton is male or female.
Okay. I'll do my best, though. I feel responsible for making everybody happy.
And the first thing to check is the arm position.
When we opened the sarcophagus of Yiput, Dr. Ramadan was suspicious about the position of the arm. Now we are going to x-ray this mummy and figure out the real position of the arm.
Okay, ready? Shoot.
The first x-rays confirm the team's initial suspicions.
Okay, good. If you put arm position, the crossing of the left arm over the chest, it looks like the burial of a woman. It is very clear.
Further scans reveal other specific clues.
Shoot. The skull is not really in a good condition, but this bone beneath the ear, it is smooth, and the roundness of the skull, I have this feeling that this could be a woman. This pelvis. The pelvis also is not that intact, but there is a big round cavity just towards the female. Also, the blades of the iliac region, they are more flat. This is also with a woman.
The X-ray is telling me that Yiput is a woman, not a man. My journey in understanding Yiput is like a roller coaster of understanding. You go up one point and then all of a sudden you drop down. This is what makes archaeology so interesting.
And while there's no evidence to suggest that Chanamit was a woman, what the team can be sure of is that the two priests, Yiput and Chanamit, shared a similar status and background.
This chamber presented us with a trove of information in the form of two beautiful sarcophagi inscribed for two persons. Their names alone says something about them being Libyans, immigrants who lived in Egypt and become completely Egyptianized.
Even more significant is the goddess these two Libyans, along with the priestess and the silver mask, worshipped.
Shaft K24 has the largest number of mentions of the goddess Nuches in one place in the entire country of Egypt. I think we discovered a new cult in ancient Egypt, the cult of a goddess we didn't know much about, with priests and priestesses who served her.
And to Ramadan, a new cult suggests something more.
Did Nuches have her own shrine in the immediate vicinity of Shaft K24, or a temple with economic revenues that allows the priesthood to amass such wealth that is reflected in the richness of their burials.
It's questions like this that are the reason why the team is still digging.
Ammar, نسوي investigate.
And if the discoveries so far are anything to go by, then there will surely be more secrets to uncover.
The only reason to do Egyptology is because you enjoy it, you love it, you love the ancient Egyptians. You really want to find out what they were doing, what they were thinking, how they were functioning. It is also lovely because you realize they might have lived 3,000, 2,000 years ago, but there's very little difference between them and us.
Our mission here, what we're doing is looking for information and rewriting the story of every individual we discover here.
And we're still going to gather more of it.
This is for us a lifelong research project.